My name is Ben Dreith. I'm the U.S. editor for Dezeen. I'm going to be hosting this panel today. We have some wonderful panelists here from a variety of disciplines, all based in Chicago, working in the city. And they'll be able to really take us on a journey about what's happening right now. It's obviously a big topic, a whole city and then an industry as big as, furniture and design and in general. So we're going to be, kind of locating some trends and some institutions and just what they think is going on right now. I know that I'm excited to hear it. I respect all three of them quite a bit. So I'm going to let them go through and introduce themselves, even though I'm sure that most of you already know, and then we'll get right into the conversation. So we'll start with Norman.
Hi, everyone. I'm Norman Teague, designer, assistant professor at UIC, and a lover of Chicago. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Allison Von Gleno. I have a small architecture practice in Chicago, and I also teach.
Fantastic. Hi, I'm Cheryl Durst. I'm the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, which is the International Interior Design Association, proudly headquartered here in Chicago, which we all love.
Great. Yeah, no, love Chicago. Me too. Happy to be here. I think, Cheryl, I wanted to start with you, just because I was writing about earlier this year and very excited about, and I think a lot of people were, this fact, and I think most people probably know this here, of the kind of burgeoning Chicago Design Week. And I think that this, to me, is a really good kind of bellwether indicator of sort of, if we're going to talk about where Chicago has been and where it's going, from an on-the-ground general design perspective, I think this is a great thing. And you've been really involved with this. So maybe you could just, in case anyone doesn't know, just tell us a little bit about kind of what has coalesced into that, and then what you think that means for kind of what conditions have allowed that to happen.
Sure. I mean, Chicago is known for its fairs and its festivals, and Lord knows we love summer and being able to get outside in the summer and celebrate, whether it's blues or jazz or books. Design deserves an equally prominent festival and fair in the city. And so IIDA kind of incubated the concept of Chicago Design Week. We have things that happen here in the month of June, like NeoCon, which is probably one of the largest North American celebrations around product, primarily around commercial design product. That morphed into, we now have an area, Fulton Market in the West Loop, where a number of showrooms had relocated out of the mart and are having their own celebration. But it was feeling like those moments were also ignoring the larger community in Chicago. It was ignoring the arts community, the gallery community, and then sometimes ignoring the city. And so knitting together all of those communities in a really coherent celebration of design seemed like it was needed. That celebrated design and people, because you don't have design without human beings. And so it's IIDA's goal to kind of knit together those disparate communities in this true celebration of design that's emblematic of this city.
Yeah, beyond the loop. I remember, I would come for NeoCon quite often, and I'd been to Chicago before, but it was often kind of frustrated, I think, with just kind of being right there. And, it gets spend the whole time in the building, and it's great. You see a bunch of great stuff, but I do think that a lot of times people, for visiting the city too, you do look past some of the neighborhoods and the breadth of it, right? If you're just going right downtown. Is there any specific, I know that Norman, you've been involved a lot with the architecture event and kind of trying to get out into the different neighborhoods. Is there any specific, do you have anything to say sort of about the stitching together or just trying to bring different parts of the city together and why that's important?
Yeah, no, I think Chicago has been a really great outlet for years. And I think NeoCon for me has always been a place to meet and greet and see. And I do love the compactness of having all of that in a building, but I also appreciate getting outside of that. And I think one of the many fascinating fairs that we've had came from a very guerrilla standpoint, which was Guerrilla Truck Show, which is a really fascinating way to spend time after NeoCon, to come down to Fulton Market, which was a a very different place at that time. But to go inside of the various trucks and see not just these designs that people had made, but the designer would be there as well. And I think these really rich kind of getting to know the craft of where it comes from has become a really important thing in Chicago and abroad.
Yeah, just in terms of actually going and seeing. I never got a chance to see that truck show. I have met.
Cineway.
Yeah, and seen that.
Portland's amazing.
Legend.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's interesting too because it really is. Just even the guerrilla aspect of it too, like the name. There's like things popping up, and there's I think a certain sort of people see Chicago and they're like, these kind of stable skyscrapers that's there. It's like very set in stone, and they kind of look past some of the, I think, on the ground stuff sometimes too, just when you talk about the design culture, right? It's like really easy to talk about the architecture culture of Chicago, and they shouldn't be like completely unlinked from each other, but...
Yeah, no, I didn't see it as an unlink. I felt like it was the after party. I felt like it was close niche to sort of the life that was going on in the city, but also saying like, don't forget about us, like dirty fabricators who get really into the work and make these things. And I always thought it was a fascinating way to sort of jump out of neocon and into like almost the grit of the city and have a glass of wine on the street and check out all these amazing designers and fabricators.
Is there what's going on in fabrication right now in Chicago? Just like you've been making stuff here for a while, like do you feel like people are kind of getting back into it a bit more? I mean, I'm from New York, and 10 years ago there was a big push towards, just kind of small designers just working in like a loft or a studio. It's kind of changing now with like real estate prices, and I think that's something that everything has to deal with. But right now, do you think that's happening in the city, or do you think people are really kind of fighting to try to find the space?
Yeah, I do think. I mean, you got to think about Chicago. We raise designers. Like we have 3 to 4 different design colleges in this city, and all these young people graduate, and they're looking for these spaces to spend time and sort of further this thing, because I think school really allows you to get in the depth of like, ooh, I think I can make these things. I can, and then you get out and they're like, oh, but you can't use this, studio to do it anymore. So now you got to get out and partner up with someone. So I think a lot of collectives are starting. We've got Doc 6, which started as like little infant babies that were like raising these little pieces of furniture, and now they hold a place in the design world now. And so I feel like things like those small collectives are definitely heard. They have a value in the city. We have small manufacturing hubs over here on Damon and Fulton. We have quite a few outlets for people. So I think the industry is still cranking. I think particularly now with the tariffs, we almost somewhat forced to look within just a little bit more. And so I feel like that's an active place right now in Chicago.
Yeah. No, there are some great institutions, and I know, Allison, you mentioned you're teaching now, and Eric have kind of, I know you've also taught in the East Coast, and you've taught here. I think you have a pretty good, grasp on the general state of it. What are you seeing right now, kind of maybe you could tell us a little bit about what your teaching practice is right now, sure, and just how those institutions are sort of working with what Cheryl and Norman have said.
Yes, for sure. So we're teaching at the GSD right now at Harvard, and our studio is actually sort of about the culture, art, and architecture scene in Chicago, and creating an art infrastructure that supports all of these temporary events that are ongoing throughout the city. So it's a very great semester to be coming here. We always bring our students to Chicago, and I will say it's a very attractive city for students just graduating out of undergrad or graduate school. Every year, we teach out of state a lot, and we get at least 1 to 2 students after we have a Chicago trip who come here, get to experience a city for a week and really see, okay, this is a city that's making things and doing things, and there's lots of innovative practices experimenting here, which I think is like a big history of Chicago, trying out new things and being daring and bold. It's such like a legacy that the city holds and continues to promote. But I think it's really attractive to students coming here, and we have the biennial also that's coming up in a week or a week and a half. So it's really like an anchor in the States, I think, for art and architecture and design broadly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That are a lot of the students that you're bringing in, are a lot of them Chicagoans or kind of from all over?
All over. So yeah, we've taught at Princeton and Rice and Harvard, and I think we now have a total of 7 non-Chicagoans who have moved here because we always do a studio trip. Every studio is always about Chicago, art and architecture or housing, some combination of that, and we always happily get some students to come back to this great city.
So when you, like, they walk in kind of the first day of the course or something, like, what's the top line thing you say? Just like, this is Chicago, you know? Like, what does the first day look like? I mean, yeah. Like,
it's a good question. I feel like we actually are the studio that's, like, other studios are going to Greece, to Japan, Hong Kong, and we're like, it's Chicago. But I think that people have a reason to want to come to Chicago. It's a very attractive city for somebody thinking about their future in the design industry because it's affordable, it's accessible. There's a great collective of practitioners here that they could come work with. And it's, also a welcoming, generous environment. It's not like a very cutthroat environment, but there are supportive institutions like the Graham Foundation that are kind of continue to support and bring up emerging and established practices.
So they already know, kind of, right? When they're.
I think. Well, we always make sure we see all of these institutions and we a little bit show off our city.
Okay, that's good.
It's such an accessible city. It's a great starter city for students and emerging professionals. And once you get beyond figuring out pizza and hot dogs and CTA, the majesty of the city is its manageable majesty, right? It's so accessible, yet it is, Chicago is an icon of great design. I don't know that everybody realizes it, but I think beyond realizing it, you feel it when you're here.
Yeah, I mean, the atmospheric nature. I think that we talked about this a little bit before too, but I think that some of what you all do and some of what institutions do is that, like, feeling it is one thing, but I think it really is important to sort of circumscribe it, right? And to make sure that people are, coming to the point a bit, right? Because if you walk through and you're like, wow, I had this great feeling, but I don't really know why, I think that that's why some of the educational stuff is so important. And I mean, I do think the city does a great job at kind of, with architecture tours and these things of like, promoting a sort of civic pride in the.
I think the city feels like a classroom in a lot of ways because you can walk down the street and stumble upon a Mies van der Rohe building. You can walk pretty much through the campus of IIT. And so all of these spaces that we have across Chicago are real teachers in themselves. I personally, in a classroom, I am always eager to get my students out of the classroom. In fact, 75% of my class is in these streets as best we can, visiting with manufacturers, visiting architecture, or just, visiting a park district and meeting with particular people. But I feel like there's so much to learn just walking through this city. The changes that you get from one neighborhood to the next become educational.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
And you draw inspiration from a bunch of different places too. I think I've seen some of your shows, and you're referencing one thing this time, and the next time you're doing like plastic vases and in Venice. But and you mentioned the experimentation, Allison. But one thing that I hear from young designers is often like, we really want to experiment. We don't have the spirit, but we also want to be able to be commercial, and be able to sort of get our products out there if we need to. So how do you kind of, if someone's coming into your studio, Norman, and they're like really seeing some of the, some of the art stuff you're doing and some of the exhibitions, like, what is your philosophy on?
Write a check.
Yeah.
Write a damn check. Write a damn check. I think the uniqueness of our studio is, we're a room full of colored people, so that in itself is rare, and we use that to highlight cultural aesthetics within the work that we do. Sometimes it just allows us to be a little wild and whimsical, and then we are sometimes forced to pull that back. But I think we're not afraid to break rules. I think there's rules that go along with the standards of what furniture is doing, and we try our best to focus on being slightly different and original, and sometimes unsafe slightly with the chair. But so it's and I think we get a kick out of that, and I think that our clients do as well. A lot of the work that we sell at the studio is not mass produced, so there is a certain comfort in knowing that you are almost have this limited edition thing that also has a story to it, that's also designed by a couple of black dudes on the West Side. I guess it's the truth. It's what we are, and if that becomes a selling point, that's what we push, or we just stay who we are. It's a ton of fun, and whoever visits our studio finds it slightly electric. Just it could be because it's so unorganized. I think when you walk into a lot of design studios and architecture firms, there is a certain order. Our order is chaos. And it seems to work. We know where everything is, and we haven't lost a finger yet, so it's cool.
The yet part is scary.
I am not my own salesperson. You know that, right?
Yeah, I know that. Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, I think that kind of squares the circle a bit, because we were talking before this about, that there is this desire and this drive, I think, in the, with interior designers and architects too, to sort of link up with that energy a bit too, or to cultivate it, right? Like I think that a lot of people I talk to in the designing spaces, and they're doing interiors or hotels or whatever, that it's kind of more like a little bit more like, where did this come from, and like who is behind it, and like what is this piece going to kind of say about whatever room it is. And I know I think you were saying also that you picked up on that for some of the people you've been talking to as well. Mm-hmm. Cheryl, I know that you mentioned that there's this big drive towards individualism, the story, and
the story is important. And we talk about the provenance of product, and from a sustainable standpoint and a do no harm standpoint, absolutely. But who created this? Who crafted this? What's the story behind, right? If you have pieces in your home, you are collecting those pieces, and you want to know that story. What's the background? What's the genesis? I think it just adds that additional layer of meaning and relevance, but keeps it real. I'm intentionally not using the word curated, but the things we put around us have meaning, or should have meaning, and they tell us who we are. Mm-hmm.
Which I think makes the job of the designer a little bit more difficult sometimes too,
Absolutely.
Right? Because every meeting connects with different people in different ways,
Yeah.
and if you're doing something for someone, it's doing that extra layer on top of it. It's I mean, at the end of the day, more work for people too, right? To make sure you're connecting people with objects or styles that they need to be, or want to be, or don't know that they need to be,
Or helping them discover that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a whole almost a whole nother job. I mean, it's obviously people see things through books and through magazines and there's this whole apparatus, but I think we're kind of just realizing again what that process of discovery looks like, and that is kind of why it is important to have, like lots of different like little events happening and like collectives and curations, right? And just making sure that you're giving as many touch points for people to see these things as they possibly can. Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Allison, that you're interested in the prevalence of like small events and just kind of like these activations and stuff. Is that an angle that you're looking at for this? Just connectivity between people and ideas and things? Is that one of the things that you see driving that?
Yes, I think so. In terms of like how in my practice, or you're saying in Chicago?
Well, both. I mean, I know that you said you're interested in that aspect of Chicago in
Yes.
terms of the, micro collectives and events.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that helps really make a really supportive environment for designers to have multiple events, and like even something like this is really great to be a part of, and hear different perspectives, I think, on how the city is working as a design collective together. I think going to objects in a space, it is so important how people select, and how when we're designing a space, we're designing the space, but we're also thinking about what is going in that space and how are you living your life in that space, what are you interacting with. And so always we are thinking about what are those objects, and hoping to connect our clients to a story or to somebody that they're wanting to invest in. Because I think we are part of this like design ecosystem, and as an architecture practice, we want to engage with artists and furniture designers and like the whole spectrum of what makes design and what curates this life around us. So I think it's really important, this like the relationships we build, like maybe learning from events that are going on and seeing, meeting new artists and new makers and seeing what we can kind of fold into new stories we're writing together in the spaces that we're making.
Yeah, I mean, because you can talk about, we almost simplify sometimes. We're like, yeah, putting objects in our space, but you're right. Like every single thing that you're touching is connected to the city or the country. There are these chains, and I think that we're becoming a bit more aware of that as well, too, right? Like this sustainability conversation is one, but then there's all the sort of like emotional and like labor aspects of just like things moving across the earth, and then like this thing starting in Norman's workshop and ending up in someone's house, or in a different country even, right? And there's so much like emotional, physical labor that goes into that, and I think we're becoming a bit more aware of those chains as well.
Yeah, understanding the energy that furniture emits. Because the time element, the craft element, the tenure of it, how long you will keep it. I think we went through a period, and whether it was office design or even in homes, we went through a very sterile, clinical period. But I feel like everything feels very rich and layered now. I will fully admit that I am a maximalist, so more is always more. But I feel that philosophy has become more meaningful to people, and not just surrounding yourself with things for the sake of things, but they're kind of essential ephemera that, it makes me comfortable. It puts me at rest. It makes me feel peaceful. We have these talismans or these touchstones around us, and whether it sits on your desk or sits on your nightstand, it really resonates with who you are and who you are as a person, or who you are as part of a culture, or who you are as a family. And I think people are leaning more into that aspect of storytelling around our things.
And
No, I think that really asks a lot for furniture designers to really consider those things in the work that's being put out now as well. I think that we are slightly concerned with the conversations that go around the coffee table. And so I think that those narratives carry a lot more weight, be it, the pot that was made, through a particular firing process. But I think all of this, you almost want to know the artist a little bit better. You want to know where this slightly was born, that narrative, and it becomes a part of your life. And so now you're sitting around, drinking whiskey with friends and talking about the beauty of how this thing was made. And I think that story it's becoming a lot more important to the consumers, that they can actually share that story, that they actually know Tony Montana, who made the piece of furniture, or Tyrone Jackson, who made the piece of furniture, and how he made it, and why the legs are, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I think it just carries a lot more weight today, and I think that we also have a sort of, we have young people coming out of school making enough money to furnish their own home now. You know, I mean, they come out making six figures, and I think we didn't have that. We had the Salvation Army or AMVETS where we could go and furnish with pieces at a time. But I think that consideration becomes a lot more ephemeral when you've actually met that designer, talked through the process, possibly went to his studio, her studio, and watched them make that thing. It becomes essential. Like, I'm going to kind of protect that piece just a little bit more. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You're right. I mean, in my mind, that's a good place to sort of focus on, though, right? Because one benefit of, you mentioned like uniqueness or sort of like personal style or family style is that I think it does cut down on the prevalence of trends. And to me, like a lot of times trends do just mean flipping stuff over every 5 or 6 years, and you can refresh but if you kind of have this more enduring narrative with your things, then maybe things, you keep them for longer, right? And, obviously the quality needs to be good. I mean, it needs to feel good and it needs to last. But I do think that maybe people who are kind of furnishing whole apartments at a time, if we do kind of build up a narrative of, oh no, you don't have to switch everything over because you put so much time into finding this thing, right? Mm-hmm. But that's an ethos thing, and I do think that is where maybe something like Chicago Design Week comes in, right? Or these institutions to sort of create like a base layer for that, right? Of just the culture of design and its importance.
Yeah. Nostalgia is so important, and memories are so important, and I think I'm going to make up a word, but I want to err on the side of when people are thinking about furniture that it's memorable and not memeable. I don't know if memeable is a word, but don't make your living space a meme. Mm-hmm. Make it a memory. Yeah. It's your artifact for the future. And we're all caught up in social media culture, but memeable won't last. Mm-hmm. Memorable will.
What would you say, like a memeable living room?
A couple things came to my mind when you said it.
So I will go old school on you for memeable because it was pre-meme, but once upon a time, in every photograph you'd see of an interior space, there was a bowl of Granny Smith apples. Mm-hmm. Always. You would always see that same photo of those apples everywhere. I think currently I've seen in a lot of photography, the slightly bent, it's like super pretty, but bent flowers have been a thing. And it's like, don't do that. Like, I love magazines as inspiration, but like, I don't want my life to look like a magazine. I want it to look like a life. And so it's a little messy. Mm-hmm. And it's a little me. And I think magazines and beautiful places like this are such great sources for inspiration and information, but then what's your layer of you? Mm-hmm. What's your fingerprint that you can put on your space?
Yeah.
That's important.
Sorry if there's any producers of artificial apples in the audience.
Super sorry if I insulted your apples or your wilted flowers.
It makes me think of the word family heirloom. Uh-huh. Like the thing that you're going to pass down, the thing that after you've moved out and you've tossed out all your IKEA furniture, it's still there. Mm-hmm. And it still means as much as it did when you bought it. And you're trying to convince your kids how important it is to hold on to it. And I think that is a really crucial thing to consider when we're considering the character of your living space. Like that thing, it holds a space, and everything else is kind of furnished around it, but it moves with you. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to toss it there.
Yeah, and good designers understand what moves with you. Mm-hmm. They take the time to understand you, which makes your job, as you were saying earlier, Ben, so much harder because, you're one part cultural anthropologist and one part therapist, and then maybe you're going to do some architecture. But
Spot on.
understanding human beings is so key to design writ large with a capital D, but certainly interiors. You have to understand human beings and what they want and what they need and what they might want and need 5 years from now.
20 years from now.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing too, and I wonder how maybe as designers and in very of a place and like to talk about it, like it's very difficult to do that these days too, right? To be like, what is someone living in Chicago doing? Because two people could be in apartments like next to each other and they're consuming completely different media, and I mean obviously there's still roots and people connected, but kind of more than ever, it's like it's really hard to figure people out, just even based on that. So. I think that we were talking about this before, but also, and this is kind of overdone, but I think you'd mentioned, Norman, like in video calls and stuff we're doing all the time, you see in homes, right? So that's a whole nother layer of it as well, is that we've kind of been forced into this a bit to maybe be a bit more unique or like memeable in our homes. And I think that's a good thing, or it can be.
Or have a good Zoom background.
Yeah, or a good Zoom background.
Type of stuff.
Yeah, you kind of see those ebb and flow a bit, the Zoom backgrounds.
Yeah. There's a rich happening right now because how our homes are becoming so much. It's such a dual place. It's, this is your workspace during the day, but it's also by the time the kids get home from dinner, this is also the dinner table, and so we have to be this versatile group now that this work from home. I've taught many classes from my dinner table, and I love the idea of that, but I think it also forces us to look at how flexible a space must be today, and I think our studio is sort of battling with this as we consider the next product and how to make that a more convenient piece of furniture that is lightweight, well made, and in that bracket of family heirloom. Like how do you do that? So we're pushed to do a lot of that in our work today. I don't know if that answered it.
No, it doesn't. It makes. I think it leads into something else that I wanted to ask Allison about too, which is this kind of flexibility, or I think we framed it as, a lot more people are living in the cities too, right? And spaces are getting smaller than some of the suburban trends I think of like 30 years ago. But I hear a lot about flexibility, especially in the workplace, and I think these are important conversations to be having. But I know that you do a bunch of different kind of typologies too in your architecture practice, and I guess I'm wondering like what types of, are there other types of flexibility besides just sort of like eating at the in an office space that you're working on in with your clients, or some of the conceptual projects that you're doing? Just an overall question, just sort of how are some of the things we're talking about now sort of feeding into the architecture practice?
Yes, I think a lot of the spaces that we work on, we do lots of new construction, but we also do lots of renovation. Renovation is probably the bigger bulk of our work. So a lot of it is interiors and carving or making spaces in a space that already exists. And so I think that's about finding spaces that are comfortable for people, or spaces that people are comfortable with. And I almost think this goes to like our conversation on like what you're surrounded with in terms of furnishing, like finding pieces that are just comfortable and you just don't question it. Maybe it's something that comes from your parents, or something that is handed down, and then objects that are a bit more striking and memorable and purposeful, and curated to what you're kind of wanting to identify yourself with. I'm not answering your question.
Do you mean that like people are more okay with living in like a converted building, and that's like something that people are seeking, or is that kind of like what needs to be done? Like what do you think is driving some of the conversion? I see a lot of it. I mean, in some of these kind of neighborhoods in Chicago too, it's just that industrial zones are changing, right? And that's happening in a lot of cities, and it has been happening in different rates at different times. And so there's like a necessity to it, right? But I know that, for example, the first time my mother saw the brick walls in my apartment in New York, she was very unhappy that that she was like, hey, how old is this? And I was like, no, Mom, it's got character.
Right.
I know. And that's the thing, and it's hard to tell how much of that is marketing sometimes, and how much is character. So I guess that when people do come to you with these projects, like what are some of the motivations? Is it always just that, like, this is what we have, this is what we're building in, or is there also a drive to, because there's also a big preservational aspect to these too, right? Like, these buildings have so much embodied carbon that, it's better to not tear them down if we don't need to, but then densities, and it's just a complex matrix when it comes to these renovations.
Right. Maybe two projects that are not domestic but institutional come to mind right now. One is for Rice University. We were asked to create a welcome center there, project. And we wanted to create something that was very specific, a space to welcome students, but also flexible enough that it could also just be used for internal staff meetings or professor meetings. And so it's this kind of very fluid space. We've got like faceted but overall curving glass walls that you can look in to find staff and professors. So there's this like visual transparency and connection within the space that we did. But also there's this open table, for instance, that is just very open-ended, like what happens at the table. It's like the dining room table, but in school.
Yeah.
So I think we're always like looking to find these overlap spatial moments that multiple things can happen. And another example is for the library at the School of the Art Institute. We redid the library and created a 2-story atrium to connect the special collections from the 5th floor up to the 6th floor main collection for the School of the Art Institute. And we made these like little nooks along this elongated corridor, but it became something bigger than a corridor space. It was the space plus, basically. And so I think finding ways that the space is not just like a one-liner, it does one thing, but it can do multiple things. It can be the small space for me to like study and just like huddle and look at my book, or it's my space where I'm going to meet my friend before we go grab coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read the Rice project was interesting too, because really beautiful project. Everyone should go look at that. But you're also kind of working, if I'm right, working kind of inside an older building that was then connected to a newer connection that was put on top of it, right? And so you're really using design to sort of also connect the old and the new. And I think that's like a really fascinating, on the level of furniture too.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. That upper level connection, we were connecting to a new building by Swiss architects Karamakwo, and there was a 3-level difference between this Sterling building that we were working on, a Pritzker Prize building, and so there was also this like level of fear working with this existing building. But it was also really fun getting to learn more about this architect, his thought process, and wanting to like kind of show off how he had designed this building, and now kind of how can we rethink some of these spaces, but in light of today and what institutions want today, and how can we show off their mission spatially. And so this maybe goes to like a kind of do-it-yourself culture or like workmanship, but one thing we created were these stepped seating areas for a new student forum. This was a space that the school didn't have, but because they made this new building, they suddenly had a pocket of space that they were free to decide what to use it for. And so this was something with student feedback. Students wanted a space for themselves to not have lunch at their desk and have just a kind of open hangout space. So this is really a flexible space that we created, a student forum, that has these kind of smaller nooks, but also could be a larger gathering space for the 80 student body that is Rice architecture. So yeah, finding multiple ways to create like small nooks, but also bigger spaces for multiple things to happen.
I love that. I feel like people do sometimes use like the jazz or music metaphor when it comes to architecture and design, and that idea of like riffing on the old building and respecting it, and then kind of connecting to the new one, and then also the needs like all at once is like a really great, like,
beautiful when it's
example
done well.
of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. So we've talked a lot, I think, about some of the different, what we see as some of the changes and stuff happening. But Cheryl, I know you in your position work with a ton of designers, and I was wondering maybe are there anything lately or just like in general that people have been coming to you with like, problems that they're having or, in the field right now? Like kind of what are you seeing from an overhead view in that?
There's been a lot of conversation around neurodiversity and how do we create spaces that are inclusive of all users. Obviously, universal design is a ethos of the industry, absolutely. But this focus on the fact that we are all comprised of so many different abilities, and what does it mean? When you were talking about the Welcome Center, literally, how do we create spaces that feel welcoming to all people? When we're talking about commercial space, particularly, what makes a space feel inclusive? How does it act? How is it lit? Who belongs in this space? Does this space tell me that I belong, or what's sending me signals that I don't belong in this space? That seems to be such a huge conversation right now, and putting very deliberate and intentional thinking around the larger term neurodiversity. And again, maximizing human potential in place.
Yeah, I think that it's a really hard line to walk, because I think that some of the critiques of sort of, you mentioned like this sterility or like modern spaces, were that I think a lot of those spaces did try to be like, okay, we're going to kind of like, create a baseline or something, right? And then things change, or people realize, oh, this is only kind of, it's universal, but only kind of in one sense, right? So it's like, it feels like you always kind of have to make those decisions, and I'm always interested to see when people do, right? It's like this space is, for as many people as possible, but then also kind of from this lens and, from this where it needs to be. So it's, it's a very difficult line to walk. And
right.
I guess that when you talk to people about that, do you feel like there's any approaches that you find people are really just leaning into? I mean, I know that the DIY approach specifically for neurodivergence is an interesting one, right? Because if someone has a very specific disability or sensitivity that, there's a whole group of people at NYU, for example, right, who are designing 3D printed stuff for like very specific individuals, and that's interesting. But that also, again, kind of to the individualism, it's a lot of work. And
I think a lot of people stop the conversation at probably race and gender, but there are so many other factors, right? There's size. You mentioned sensitivity, and so much now more is being done with kind of all of the senses in design. But when you think about scent, there are some people who are scent sensitive, and so it's being considerate or thoughtful of all of the elements that make us human. And when you're designing for the edges, then everybody gets to win, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But it's being thoughtful and deliberate and intentional about that. It can ring super badly when it's inauthentic. And I was talking to somebody about a project that they were doing, and it was a welcome center at an HBCU. And they were talking about, well, if we put some James Van Der Zee photography there, and it's like, nope, just because it's a Black photographer doesn't mean that's the right thing to do. And so again, I go back to, I think it would be advantageous in more design programs to actually have cultural anthropology as part of the curriculum. Understanding human beings and the history of human beings, and not just one type of human being, would be such an additional education for designers. And I won't even say additional education because it's built into who you all are as designers.
It's such a rich direction. I applaud the conversations that are going on. I hear community so much more now, and I know for a fact that community means something completely different to every last one of us. Yeah. And there are so many different communities that we all share. But I do wonder what design will look like 10, 20 years from now if this particular subject and community of diversity and designing for all, what is that going to look like 20 years from now? And I keep, I had a lot of fun like playing at the MoMA and playing in AI and thinking about what does it look like to have these kind of visually equitable moments in design, and what would the canon look like if certain things were not in place and certain systems were not in place. So I'm really excited to see what the whole community and social design starts to do in the future. I'm sure this will take years, but I hope that it begins to look differently and it begins to pay attention to what accessibility really looks and feels like. What it is to think about design when it comes from a grade school level or a high school level. How are we listening to our students about how to design the next school? All of these things really feel like detrimental moments to our future.
Yeah. And design is such an act of optimism because designers really do believe in the benefits of design and uplifting the human condition. And I think that's the right path to continue to be so optimistic about culture and about humanity and craft. And yes, AI is a thing, but we can't lose the human hand in what is created.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And there is also, it made me feel good that you had that show in it was MoMA, right, with the AI, and then I think about Jermaine Barnes' show that you did, and there is like this sort of like very subtle critique that can happen in design too, right? And in a moment where everything is being kind of looked at, right, and tearing apart on the museum level, because I think that once I see something kind of come into the museum level, I'm like, okay, not to say that they're justifying it, but I'm saying like this is like there's a lot of momentum behind some of these ideas. I do think that you say the whole city is the kind of the classroom, the educational room, and I think that you all kind of keeping at that and like integrating these stuff into the design. We talked about the atmosphere and the vibe before. Like, sure, it's helpful to circumscribe it, but also if you are picking up on that vibe, it is shifting some needle and moving things forward, even if subtly, right, even if it's not said. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I definitely see a change. I see so many designers of color now. I think we need another movement. I don't know. It's it's a little Bauhaus movement going on right now, and it's being sort of kept on the DL. But I hope that we could sort of celebrate the moments that are changing. And in all honesty, can I be frank? I could be frank. I hope this King Living actually reaches out to somebody and, gets some local designers inside of here. And, I think it's kind of a really great way to call yourself local is to bring about local collaboration from a corporate level. And I think that even is becoming more of a thing to do. Joe Fresh Goods, New Balance, I think, things are happening in different ways, and I think it essentially it works for both parties. I think call it business as usual, but I think it's new collaborations are helping us to open our eyes up, to make new friends, and make new money. Because that's what we're all doing, right? I wasn't always like this. Well, I used to just like making things, but
don't get into chair design, guys. Great. Well, I think that that's the optimism, this gesture towards collaboration is a good place to put a pin in it for now. I want us to keep talking to you.
I want to hear from these guys
all night. Yeah. No, I think that we do have some time for questions. But yeah, first let's give a round of applause to these three.
Hi, everyone. Fantastic conversation, by the way. So within the future of kind of what you see in your different realms of architecture or how we shape spaces or how we shape furniture, I think one of the most powerful aspects of those is how those things then shape culture. And I'm really curious if you had any thoughts of things that you would like to see more of in the future around any one of those specific disciplines that you're involved in, if there is something that exists in the future that you think could be pushed more, through those individual pieces or those different ways.
There's some aspect of the things we surround ourselves with should not lower our IQ or make us feel stupid. And so for me, that has everything to do with seamless, flawless technology that I can access and use. And I'm thinking in terms of maybe in a hotel room, that when I walk into a space, it should make me feel good about me and not less than who I am. And I think we've all probably encountered being in a space where we didn't know how to turn the lights on or what does this panel do, and all of a sudden the shades are flying up. And so that idea of integrating technology, and I'm not a Luddite, I'm not anti-technology, but integrating technology so that it too is as humane as the remainder of my surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Glad we're recording this.
Gonna use it for something good.
Yeah.
I think maybe when we're looking at new or spaces, sometimes within a space or building a new space, is to not just accept what's always been done as the way to do it moving forward. So we get really excited with taking on a new project always to rethink what is a closet or what is a bathroom? Do we have to have everything closed behind doors? Can we live open? I think just not always accepting the standard floor plan, and sometimes depending on the client who you're working for, we consider how do we make it familiar, but how can we also bring in something new and kind of understand how are we living in a more contemporary way now, but also we're not that it's jumping too far ahead. So we also have this phrase we do. Sometimes we smuggle architecture. We don't want it to be so foreign or alienating. We want it to be comfortable and familiar. But at the same time, we understand we're different than we are 100 years ago, and we're living differently and experiencing life differently. Mm-hmm. So I think we always like to test out new things, and that's why design is exciting and fun.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think I'm thinking like Enzo Mari to some extent. I wish there was a thing that we could each take home in a separate box and bring back and look at the various ways in which we all put it together differently. But I feel compelled to think about how we learn from making. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Is I think I said it on something the other day. I think all architecture students should build a house before they can be given a license. Sorry. Just because I think there's so much in the process of...
with bare hands?
Yeah, with their hands. It ain't got to be a big house. It could be a small house. It could be a log cabin house. But I feel like there's such a process in there that it brings your drawings to life. And I know it does if that other guy does it too, but it's so much learning and putting a nail in a piece of wood and cutting a piece of wood. So, that's what I'm thinking about. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Those low income, places in Chicago, how do you guys feel about bringing design, the idea of design to them? Because, you guys say, it's, you have to learn people, you have to understand what they want. So how can those low income communities, be embraced and to know what they want? and how can we bring that there?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. A lot of my tenure research is around that. So I don't know if I can answer like how we can do it outside of my dream work, my dream world. But I feel like the fact that we have a good amount of vacancy, I feel like those vacant storefronts could easily be silos for a month-long residency with an architect who's also looking for an office. And so these really interesting collaborations and exchanges that could happen at a first micro level could then introduce a young person to the UIC School of Design architecture, department, and so these meetings where one of the graduate students from UIC could visit, hi Minu, pointing you out, could visit, this storefront and teach a class on how to build an Enzo Mari chair. Like all of these really easy ways that we could, I think the syllabus could be whatever, but I think the idea that there's an after-school program that meets with an architect, an industrial designer, or a graphic designer is like where tax dollars could go. Like simple shit like that, I feel like could easily solve the question that you're asking. Why is it not happening more? I don't know. That one's open.
We get a public policy person in here next time. And,
Seriously, yeah. Outside of that realm of policy and kind of part of your wishful thinking, I think integrity of process and integrity of materials, because it is housing that is affordable or affordable housing, which almost mean two different things, but because it is affordable housing, it doesn't mean less than. Housing and design is about dignity and honoring the dignity of the human beings that will live in that place. And so you're not using the cheapest materials. You are not short-circuiting the process. But integrity, for me, is a word that could be used and should be used more often when we're talking about affordable housing.
Yes, yeah.
Absolutely.
I also think there's plenty of initiatives that Chicago is starting. One of them was Missing Middle. There's a competition that lots of designers were involved with to design a missing middle home in various lots throughout Chicago. So I think that it's like always something that we're wanting to be involved with and participate and bring design to, and not just do a copy and paste for what has been done, but also kind of rethink what is a new space for the home in this area, and how can we make something vibrant and exciting and that people want to go live in a very exciting way.
Yeah. Well, like you all were saying though throughout the whole talk, like in the absence of some overarching planning program, like just building connections and trying to do that as much as possible, right?
Yeah, I got too much emotion wrapped around that particular topic. But, I think, as much as and I don't mean financially either, I just think about the energy that goes into, I'm going to turn this into a bitch session, but it's going to sound like that anyway. But like a Chicago architecture biennial, beautiful thing, it brings tourism to the city. That kind of energy could go into, 63rd Street. Like, let's talk about 63rd and Damon for like a year. Like, I'm still trying to answer your question, but maybe we can talk later.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
My name is Ellen, and I appreciate you being here, and I'm happy to be here. There's a lot of talk about the multi-use spaces and the kitchen table that's converted from a workspace to the dining room table. Are you at all worried about the collapse of the dedicated workspace? And do you think this impedes upon or impacts the idea of the collective, especially post-COVID, from remote work to, out of office kind of deal? You're all educators, so you see this, and you're you're a CEO of sorts, maybe, sorry. How do you see this in your office environment, and how do you see this in your classroom? And does it affect education, collective learning, so on and so forth? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take that one. The workplace as we knew it is probably going away, gone. Work is not going anywhere, right? It just will look different. It may be performed differently. We will still need those places where work happens. And if that happens in a commercial building, awesome. If that happens in my garage, that's awesome too. If that happens at the kitchen table, I think we have to, post-pandemic, there was that, right? We remember the huge conversation about, are people going back to the workplace? Your home became your workplace, and some of us were not quite ready to go back to that space. And so how do we still accommodate what we define and know as work, but maybe it's just happening in a different place? Certainly workplaces that we've seen, we run some dozen international design competitions at IIDA, and so we've seen kind of the co-working genre to, like, we made it through the pool table and the foosball and then co-working, and now workplaces are much more comfortable. They look more like a living room. There are huddle spaces. There are nooks. Conference rooms even look different now. There's not the formal large table in the middle, that maybe there's more furniture like this. I think that as we redefine work, we need to redefine the places where work happens. Please, someone say something else.
I just want to echo pretty much exactly what you just said.
You covered it really well.
I think so. Yeah.
No.
One of these slides here is the Swiss consulate, and it's like the mostly green-looking image. But we sort of did exactly that. We modeled this very professional space, a Swiss consulate, on a living room and a family room. And so, like, there's this organically shaped table at the center where, the general consul, the deputy, the staff can gather around, but they still have their offices in a conference room. But there's a sort of this community aspect to making the place of work, but also still respecting how work sometimes needs to happen in isolation and in my own space. So I think kind of accommodating different styles of work is sort of that field to play with.
Like Barbara from HR will probably always need walls. Damn Barbara. But the rest of us might have a meeting in a space that looks like this, and that's okay. Or walking outside, or standing around a kitchen table in an amenity space. Like that all works, no pun intended.
Yeah. My studio's a mess. We work all over the place. I mean, as long as we have our laptops, we're fine. And I guess in thinking about clients, those workspaces have become nooks that I think a lot of them are looking out the window. But I'm really forcing an answer right now, so I'm gonna.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more. Oh,
is this on? So I really like what you talked about in terms of anthropology, and I synced it to culture, commerce, and community. But can you speak more deliberately about where that has been able to influence some design, like maybe some examples of that, where it's been able to really be infused in the collaborative process?
Sure. And I kept hoping it would pop up. There's a project in here of the Chinatown branch of the Chicago Public Library. And the project is probably about 7 or 8 years old now, but it was a SOM project. And it was super informed by the community that it was going to be in. And it speaks to a number of things. It's like, tell me you're in Chicago without telling me you're in Chicago. Tell me you're in Chinatown without telling me you're in Chinatown. That design team did deep research into culture and community, and it's DNA deep around the meaning of what libraries mean and what libraries and literature mean in the Asian community, and not being fearful of saying that, and saying this is held in high regard in this community, and we're going to create this for this community, but we're not going to gatekeep it. It doesn't mean that you can't come in. And so I think being unafraid in creating space for community and what allows that community to flourish. And it doesn't mean that you're not allowing anyone else to come in, but allowing for what makes that community or that culture special and unique, or what they value. But you can't do that anonymously. You can't do that as a monolith either. And so again, that curriculum around anthropology, I think, just continues to become more and more important for design, but also being unafraid to use the words.
So as someone who came up through social sciences, there are I think also architects should listen to people who are already practicing anthropology too as well, because there are lots of them. A lot of them I know need jobs too. So anyway, well, if anyone feels moved by this,
there are firms who have anthropologists in.
But I think that is sometimes you have them on staff, but then you take their recommendations, look at their surveys, but then at the end of the day, thanks, we got
in the RFP
we got
you have here.
Yeah, we got your advice, but we did the work to listen to you, but we're not going to actually do that.
Well, and not just listening to the anthropologists, but listening to the stakeholders and the users too, the people who will be using that space.
Exactly. Well, thanks everyone so much for the wonderful questions. We appreciate everyone, and thanks so much again to our wonderful panelists. Please let's get another round of applause.